welcome to this episode of The Martial Truth, episode 26, Bunkai Oyo Applications. Just want to start off again. We've hit over 60 members. I really appreciate the people joining the channel and supporting the channel. I hope after watching this, you'll consider joining the channel. It's only $2.99 a month. You get the podcast with no commercials. You get all kinds of instructional martial arts videos on there for the different arts I teach and different subjects I'll cover. All those are on there. They're all commercial free. So I hope you'll consider joining. Please, again, click that like button. Subscribe if you haven't, and please share the videos. It helps a lot with the channel. It helps me to grow the channel, which is something I'd like to do, and hopefully you'd like to see me do. All right. So let's talk about Bunkai, Oyo, analysis, Henka, right? All these different terms we hear. First off, when I started training Nishinryu Karate back in 1979, the word Bunkai was used. It was used in that first dojo. But the techniques I was shown, that I was told, well, this is what you're doing on this move. Again, I was 15. I didn't know anything. So I was like, oh, okay, right? But then as I got older, training, got more serious in my study, started questioning things, began the study of some other arts, I began to question and say, like, the techniques I was being shown made no sense. Made no sense from a fighting standpoint. Now, if you're looking at martial arts, and we'll use karate here as an example, but any empty hand art this applies to, okay? If you're looking at it heavy on the art side, heavy on the fitness side, then the fighting side may not matter to you that much. And that's okay. That's okay. But for some of us that had to rely on the martial arts we studied to protect ourselves and save ourselves and others because of the line of work we chose, it's important. It was important for me. So, I began looking at things and saying, and eventually, I left my first instructor for many, many reasons. All right? Many, many reasons. And I began a quest because Master Shimabuku told me in Okinawa to go and study with people who knew more than me and take the best things from those people and make your own strong Isshinryu. So think about that. If every instructor told their student to do that, think about how powerful these individual martial arts would be. So I went out and I decided to follow his direction and create and make my own strong Isshinryu. Now, whether you feel that Isshinryu Karate is the same as the first generation students that brought it back or whoever, frankly, I don't care. I know it has the approval of the headmaster in Okinawa, and that's all that matters to me, and it's a powerful art. My Isshinryu is very powerful, and it's very effective in actual fighting. So Bunkai, the word. The word Bunkai means to disassemble or to analyze. Okay, so disassemble. So we have these movements in the kata. So remember, kata, the word kata translates to mold. Not mold like you find on a piece of bread or a piece of cheese, but mold that creates an object, right? So we have a mold, we pour plastic into that mold, or we pour something else, and then when we separate that mold, we have an object. And now we can repeat that process. And the object that comes out is exactly the same. So with kata, we are trying to make the student, we're the mold. The sensei, the instructor in the school, is the mold. And now the student, we're trying to reproduce what we do in that student. And that's the initial training. And with kata, we should be concerned totally with body mechanics, the generation of power, balance, moving always in a balanced way. The movements when we practice the kata should not look like fighting. If they look like fighting, your body mechanics will suffer. So what we want to do with the kata is we want to train in a way where we move at a high level. Then we bring that ability to move like that and we bring it into the fight. So in the case of empty hand martial arts, and specifically Okinawan karate, we bring that into the bunkai. So now when we do the bunkai doesn't necessarily look exactly like the move in the kata. Some may look exactly like it. And if you're initially examining bunkai, you're analyzing your kata, you're disassembling it to figure out how to use these moves, then initially it's probably going to look like the kata. But in reality, later on it's not. We say the term oyo, which oyo is the techniques, the fighting techniques that come out of the analysis or the disassembly of the kata, the bunkai. All right? And these terms are fine, okay? But, in Chinese martial arts, we literally call it applications. So we say, okay, here's a move, here's a fighting application for it. All right, you like that one? Here's another one. Several years ago, there was an Isshinryu karate instructor, and he was going around showing all these bunkai that a lot of people in Isshinryu had never seen, so, kind of was a wow factor for a lot of people. But, he's kind of saying things like, this is the original bunkai. This is the way this move is to be used. My initial reaction to that was, unless he's conducting seances with the dead and talking to the originators of these kata we practice, there's no way he or anyone knows what the creator of the individual kata's intent was when it comes to how to use that fighting technique in application in a real fighting situation. So Sherman Harrell used to say he could spend 4 or 5 hours on the opening move of Seisan Kata. I totally agree with that statement. All right. You should analyze, disassemble the kata when it comes to trying to figure out the fighting applications, the fighting principles. What are these things the kata is actually teaching us? Is it just physical techniques, or is it also combat strategies? It's many things, okay? Is it teaching us where to strike on the human body? Absolutely. Okay, so there's many things, and you need to take a deep dive into this analysis and then come up with those techniques, that oyo, that you can put into fighting. All right. So some hints on what we should do. Again, applies to all empty hand martial arts. So moves that look like a block might not be a block, but obviously initially, think of them as a block. Figure it out. Okay. You'll see we step out and we step forward. Most of the kata, most of the moves, we step forward. There's very few we step back. Okay? I know in Isshinryu that's the case. So the masters are giving us a secret. Don't retreat, step forward. I see a lot of people teaching fighting techniques, and they back up. I'm telling you now, be a problem in a real encounter. A real encounter, you'll be in for a bit of a surprise. You must move in. So, again, when we're practicing and disassembling it and figure it out, we initially say, okay, this is the move, this is what it looks like, all right? We come up with some simple things. What a lot of people fail to realize, it's not necessarily the finish of the move in kata, but it's actually all the small movements that are going on to get to that move. So you have to look at the in-between moves and figure out, is something going on here? You not only have to figure out, you take a move in a kata and you disassemble it so much. So you look at attacks from the front. Now you look at attacks. Can I use the same technique on an attack from the rear? Can I use the same technique on an attack from the side? Can I use it to the other side? Can I use it to the front corners? Basically covering the 8 directions of attack. All right, so we went through and we figured out a whole bunch of ways to use that technique as striking. Right, as striking the opponent. Now, can we figure out a way where we use that same technique, but now we're doing joint locks? Okay. Can we figure out a way where now we're doing that same technique, but now we're doing choking? Now we're doing throwing techniques. So can we really take a deep dive and begin to really disassemble this kata and take this individual move and come up with a crazy number of oyo, of fighting techniques? So in my dojo in New York, I had many senior black belts, people that were training for a very long time. Constantly they would come up to me, say, "Sensei, we've been working on this move. an application for this move in the kata. Could we show it to you? And I'd say, sure. And they'd show it to me. And I'd say, okay, good. Do it again. I'd always watch it a few times. And I'd say, okay, good. But I think if you make this small adjustment, it'll be better. And when I showed them the small adjustment, they would always be like surprised, like, wow. So some of the surprise would be, we should have saw that. Some of the surprise was, the standard joke was, well, that's why he's sensei, right? Because I could see it. I have more experience, right? And then sometimes I would say, excellent, like, that's good. Like, the way you're doing that, that's good. And, keep experimenting. Keep disassembling. Keep analyzing. And then sometimes they'd show me a technique, and I'd be like, no, I don't think that'll work that way. And then I'd explain to them why. And then I'd say, but I'm not telling you to stop analyzing it. Like, keep analyzing it, right? So this aspect of the training is incredibly important for any martial artist that wants to become proficient in empty hand combat, not empty hand point fighting. Talking a very different animal. So the other thing is, the thing you want to realize in your training when you're analyzing is the techniques you're using on the opponent. How quick are they being enacted on the opponent? Is it overly complicated? Now, again, understand, every technique you first learn is overly complicated because you don't know it. And you're trying to do it, and it feels real difficult, and you're struggling. And then, you start to practice it, you get better and better, and before you know it, you're like, oh, this isn't that complicated. What was I thinking? Like, this isn't so bad. It's the same idea with there are no advanced techniques. There are plenty of advanced techniques. There are a ton of advanced techniques. When you first walk in the dojo, if you've never done martial arts, that first technique you learn is advanced. It's going to be complicated. You're not going to feel comfortable doing it. But you work it after a few weeks, you're like, oh, this isn't so bad. So this idea of no advanced techniques, of course there is. You should take and analyze, disassemble, twist, pull apart these movements to figure out as many different ways as possible. Okay? So that's your job. If you're doing it as a real martial art. If you're doing it as a sport, that's a total different animal. And one I'm not going to talk about today. All right. Just so you know, I met a Goju sensei many years ago, Bob Tayani, who we were both going to do seminars. He was doing a seminar. He was supposed to do a seminar on Goju Seisan. I was doing a seminar, I think something jiu-jitsu related, but I don't remember what it was. And it was at Sensei Nick Adler's, one of his camps out in Long Island. And I'd never met Tayani Sensei. And I was introduced to him. And, seemed like a really nice guy, and he was. And then what happened was he looked out and he saw all Ishinru patches. And he said, well, Sensei Adler wants me to do Goju Seisan, but you guys do Ishinru Seisan. So why don't you guys show me, like, do your move in the kata, and I'll show you some applications for it. And because he had just met me, I was the guy he kind of knew. Like, he just got introduced to me. So he says, Mike, do the first couple of moves of Seisan. So I did it, and then he started showing application and explaining things. And I was immediately taken aback. I was like, I'd never heard this kind of stuff from Ishinru Sensei. And I'd never heard this from other karate sensei at the time. Since there have been many sensei that have gone in this direction, right, including myself. So he started showing these Bunkai and this Oyo. And me and my students were like, wow. Like, these techniques make so much more sense than what we were told, like, by a lot of, to be honest, by most Ishinru Sensei. Until I met Sherman Harold later on, and then also Walter Van Gilson to a certain extent, I hadn't really experienced an Ishinru Sensei that really took that deep dive. They just had a tendency to kind of regurgitate what they were showing in Okinawa and never continued to really take a deep dive and go detailed into analyzing and disassembling the individual kata moves and to use them in combat. So Tayani Sensei really started putting me on that path, and then I started myself, which I had already started kind of on that path, but I didn't really have a guide. And then I was told he doesn't do seminars, and when I asked him to come into my dojo, he did, and he was nice enough to do a seminar, and he asked me to show me some of the bunkai I was doing for some of the other kata. And he was very kind. He said to me that I was way ahead of where he was at that stage in his training, and he had said to me that my third eye was open, that I was able to understand the movements and bring those into actual fighting techniques. So it started there. Then Sherman Harrell, I met him. Another deep dive into the analysis of bunkai and how to use the moves. And again, with both of them, even if I don't agree with every technique they did, it doesn't matter. What they gave me was they gave me the tools to say, here, Mike, this is how you do this. This is how you research into the kata, how you research the bunkai, how you come up with effective oyo, effective fighting techniques based on the movements in the kata. Okay? I've seen many Okinawan masters, 10th dans. I've seen someone ask them to show them a fighting application. And when they show the fighting application from someone like me who's been in hundreds of life and death encounters, it's utterly ridiculous. Now, on one hand, it's not their fault because Okinawa is a very safe place. So you're not really needing karate to protect yourself anymore. But if we're saying karate is a life protection art, well, then the techniques have to be viable and work. And I once had the discussion with a senior karate sensei in Okinawa Kempo. And my Kobudo master, Gakiyo Yoshiaki, was there. And he was explaining to me that on Okinawa, they lose the students at around 11 or 12 years old. And they lose the students to soccer, baseball, basketball, all these different sports where the kids are what? They're moving around a lot more. They're running around a lot. So they start getting into intramural sports in their schools, and they're like, boy, this is fun. Right? So I told him, right, why this was happening. So he says to me, well, why? Now remember, I'm a foreigner, right? But he spoke perfect English. He worked in the United States for many years. I said to him, well, the problem is you took away the serious study of karate and what karate should be. And he goes, I don't understand, Mike. I said, right. I said, you guys have all made karate a sport. You want it to be a sport. That's now the driving force on Okinawa. Sport, karate's now become a sport, and it's become tourism. Those are the two things in Okinawa, right? Okay, right? So I said, in my dojo, we have kids, but I always had more adults, but we have decent amount of kids, okay? And the kids, the karate classes are full of games and full of fun stuff, right? Because they're kids. So they're doing we do relay races where as they're doing the relay races, they're throwing front kicks back and forth across. So it's not running, it's they have to do martial arts techniques back and forth. They tag the next kid, now he has to do skip side kicks across the floor, whatever we decide to do. So we fool them in a fun way into that they don't even realize they're learning karate. And we get that kind of basic core with the kids. And then what we do is when they get to the adult class, we start teaching them the serious stuff. And usually that's at 12 or 13 years old. Now they realize, oh boy, this is dangerous. This study of karate is serious business. So now they're in 12, they're going into junior high, and now they're doing baseball and football and soccer and basketball, and they're still doing those things. But now they're realizing, oh, this karate that Sensei Calandra teaches is a little bit different. It was fun and games, was out in the kids' class, but now I come into the adult class, and wow, those techniques he's showing, they're scary. Those techniques are effective. They're dangerous. So karate study in my dojo is a serious study of life protection, right? And in Okinawa, that doesn't exist anymore. Sorry, I've been there. It doesn't exist, And I'm not saying the Okinawans don't have a high skill set. Their skill set is very high. They can generate power. There's certain things they're very good at. What they don't know how to do is actually use the kata in an actual situation. They just don't. And they haven't for a long time because this is the direction they've gone in. So if you're going to go into this direction, this study of application Bunkai Oyo, it's important you take a deep dive and understand that it never ends, right? I did a seminar quite a long time ago in New Jersey, and I was doing Sun Tzu Kata, which is the last kata, the last empty hand kata you learn. This Shinryu was created by Tatsuo Shimbu, the founder, and I was showing application. I was using my students and some other guys that were there, some other black belts. And on a break, a couple of my students came up to me and said, "Hey, Sensei, where did you, those techniques you're showing, where did those come from?" I said, "I'm not going to lie to you. I just saw them today. As the guy was coming at me, I saw that I could use that particular technique in the kata in this way." And they looked at me and they got, "So you literally came up with that today?" And I said, "Yeah." And I explained to them that a lot of times at seminars that does happen. Why? Well, because I use a lot of different people to demonstrate. And they come at me differently, a little differently, right? So now I'll see something different. I'm like, oh, I can use this technique like this. And then what I'll do is after the seminar, I'll bring it back in the dojo and I analyze it more and I play with it to try to make it even better, to understand it more deeply. All right? I train with Chen Zhanghua and Chen Style Taiji Chuan Practical Method. I've trained with Lu Changyi in Shihei Kwan, Feeding Crane Kung Fu. And it's the same thing. When I did application from these two Chinese masters, it wasn't one fighting application. They'd take and move and they'd show multiple applications. And I'd be like, whoa. And some of the applications would be a strike. Some of the applications would be a throw. Some of the applications would be a choke. Some of the applications would be a joint lock. Right? So there's all these different techniques, right? And I'm like, okay, so Okinawan arts come from Chinese arts, but we're saying that there's only one application for each move? There's one simple application? It's utterly ridiculous. Okay. So my question to karate people and taiji people and any empty hand martial art is, like taiji is very guilty of it. You see a lot of people that do taiji and that they don't know how to use the movements in an actual fight. They have no idea. And that's okay if you're doing taiji because you just like the moves and, but for myself, from a martial background, I want to know how these movements can be used in an actual fight. And in training and figuring it out, it really expands your thought process. It expands your mind. It makes you get to a certain point, where I'll give you a quick example. Husband and wife that I was teaching Kobudo 2 years ago in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She was going to be testing for whatever rank she was in Chitoru Karate, which is a style that I believe William Demetrich introduced in the United States a long, long time ago. He was a direct student of Chitose Sensei in Japan. And she had to demonstrate Bunkai for a couple of the Chito Rukata that they did. And she couldn't figure out applications for a couple of the moves. So I said, all right, let me see the moves. They asked me, Sensei, maybe you could help us with this, right? And I don't know Chito-Ru from a hole in the wall, okay? I've seen some people do kata, but I don't know it. I have a general idea of what it looks like. So I said, all right, let me see the moves. And she showed me the moves, and I said, all right, do it again. I had them do it multiple times so I could really look at it. And I said, all right. And then I started showing them some application for those moves. And their response was, how are you able to do that? How could you see that just the move and come up with an application for it? And I was like, so I jokingly said, well, the sensei told me years ago I'd opened my third eye, which allowed me to see these things, right? Which, I don't know, maybe not, right? But it sounds kind of cool, and also it's kind of funny when you think about it, right? But through my analysis of movement, I see a move, and I'm like, oh, I think I could use that like this. And, the first time I try it, it might not work. And I'm like, all right, so, yeah, that's not going to work. And I analyze it a little further. So sometimes I see a move in a kata, and I see the move, and I'm like, wow, I like that move. So it's not Ishinru, but I don't care. It's a fighting move. So I said, let me try to figure something out for that, and then I'll show it. And it's important that we, again, if we're going to do this for 50 years, all right, I'm in my 46th year. I want it to be interesting. I want the study to be deep. I don't want it to be me standing in front of a room just counting out basics. I don't want it to me just standing there watching people do group kata, which, in my dojo, we virtually never do group kata, okay? I want to take the techniques, right? I want to take the encyclopedia. I want to take the Google that is the kata, and I want to analyze that. So I want to be able to take those moves and analyze it and bring it into it. The kata is your Google. The kata is your encyclopedia. The kata is your dictionary. And this is in all martial arts. So even if you're practicing Koru and you're doing two-man kata, you should always be looking for openings and seeing, well, could I use a different technique here? And then you could always go off to the side with your partner and work on that type of technique. Okay? To give you an idea, in Sosu Ishido, which I've studied for a long, long time, we have the two-man kata, which, are set. These are how the kata are practiced. And then what we would do in the dojo is we'd work self-defense techniques. So now we'd see, can we take those kata that we're doing in this historic context for a certain time period in Japan, and can we now take those techniques and bring them into the modern arena? And in many cases we did. In almost all the cases we could do it. All right. And what I will tell you also is, in studying all these different empty hand arts, jiu-jitsu, right, karate, taiji, feeding crane, from different cultures, Japan, Okinawa, China, Taiwan, right, all these different areas, right, there are many common threads through them. So, I will also often do a technique. I'll do an application in a karate kata, and one of the taiji students will say, oh, that's similar to that application we do in taiji. A feeding crane student will say, oh, that looks like that move out of this kata in karate, or that looks... Of course, we all have two arms and two legs, right? And we can only use them. There's only so many combinations. So, Bunkai, Oyo, analysis, Henka, secret techniques, hidden techniques. Look for everything. Analyze, right? Don't settle on just a few techniques. Really analyze, figure it out, okay? Take a deep dive. And again, don't be discouraged. You're going to come up with some lousy techniques. We all do, including myself, all right? But you have to go through that process to get to the gold, right? So we go panning for gold, we shake the sieve, we shake the screen, we get the dirt out, and hopefully what remains, is that nugget, that one nugget that we're like, oh, we've got gold, right? It's the same when you're disassembling the kata. It's the same when you're analyzing it. Really, really take a deep dive. Don't be afraid to do that. Even if a technique seems ridiculous, it seems crazy, stupid, try it anyway, right? Maybe it increases your athleticism. Maybe it does something else. Maybe it leads to a better technique, all right? Hope you've enjoyed this one. I know I have. Bunkai is one of my favorite topics. Applications, I just love it, right? So, again, if you like it, please click that like button. Click it, please, all right? Share the videos. Subscribe. Think about becoming a member. It's only $2.99 a month. You get these podcasts with no commercials. You get all these instructional videos where I take a deep dive into various subjects and the different arts I do. And believe me, a lot of the subjects I'm covering will apply to all styles of karate, not just Ishinru, all right? So thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.